The stars screamed. That's what the Vaelari crew believed, as the storm tore across their cruiser like a god's fury. The ship shook, metal groaning, alarms blaring. Sparks danced across polished silver walls that once glowed with royal pride. Now, smoke filled the corridors. Bodies slammed into walls. Fires burst to life. The scent of ozone and death mixed in the air. The cruiser of Ireland's Glory, flagship of the Vaelari Empire, was falling apart. Inside the command chamber, tall, blue-skinned officers shouted in panic. Their perfect uniforms were torn, blood soaking their shoulders. The Queen's personal guards tried to stay calm, but even they trembled as the front viewing screen cracked open, revealing the black storm beyond. A gravity temperature. Impossible to predict and deadly, and it had found them. We've lost propulsion. One of the engineers shouted, clinging to a railing. Eject the pods, another yelled. The Queen of the Vaelari Solanna of Ireland stood silent in the center of the chaos. Her long, glowing robes whipped around her like wings in the wind. Her skin shimmered faintly under the emergency lights, deep blue with radiant markings, like constellations across her face. Her golden eyes watched the storm with steady defiance. "Get her to the escape pod," barked Captain Neerick. "No," the Queen said calmly. The king is on another ship," the captain growled. "Your life comes first." Two guards grabbed her by the arms, forcing her to the sealed pod chamber behind the throne. She didn't resist, but her eyes never left the storm, never blinked, never showed fear. The pod hissed. She stepped inside. The door closed. 5 seconds later, cruiser cracked in two, and her pod was flung into the darkness of space. Dash alone. Ross-9. The planet was not in any star. Map it. Wasn't part of the Vaelari Empire or any known sector. There were no cities, no satellites, and no lights visible from orbit. Just thick clouds, green storms, deep shadows. Ross-9 didn't welcome visitors. It devoured them, and now Silver Pod screamed through its sky, on fire. The jungle below stirred. Massive tree limbs, wide as buildings, shook as creatures sensed something falling from above. Giant lizards with 6 eyes growled and scattered. Insect hives the size of houses rumbled as wings clicked open. Something new was coming. Something loud, something different. A predator. Prey. The jungle would soon find out, but before the creatures reached the impact site, someone else saw it. Far away, across a rocky ridge, a man sat alone by a fire. He looked up, saw the streak in the sky, stood slowly. "Not a comet," he muttered. His voice was rough, deep, like someone who hadn't spoken in weeks. He watched the fireball fall straight into the jungle valley below. Then he picked up his spear wooden shaft. Burdened steel tipped, strapped a ragged pack to his back. His name was Mason Briggs, and he hadn't seen a ship fall from the sky in 15 years. Mason moved fast. Not because he wanted to help, he didn't know what was in the pod, but because anything falling from the sky meant danger. The jungle reacted violently to change. He knew the beasts here. He knew how fast they hunted. He sprinted through the trees, leaping over roots, ducking under vines. Every leaf he touched had a chance of slicing skin. Every puddle could hold a mouth with teeth. He knew where to step. He knew when to run. But he also knew one thing clearly. Whoever was in that pod had minutes. Maybe less. The Queen's pod hit. Hard trees cracked. Soil exploded. Metal shrieked as the impact tore through vines and stone. It skipped once, twice, then slammed into a cliff wall and stopped. Smoke hissed from broken seams. Emergency lights blinked faintly. Inside, the Queen was unconscious, bleeding from the forehead. The pod systems crackled. Oxygen hissed out. Power drained fast. Outside, shadows moved. Something large approached. Mason arrived just as the first. Creature stood taller than a horse, with long claws and a spiked tail. Its skin was bone-white and armored like a crab. Multiple eyes blinked at the pod. Its tongue slithered out. It didn't notice Mason at first, but when Mason stepped onto a rock and raised his spear, it turned and hissed. He didn't hesitate. He charged. The spear drove deep into the creature's side. It screamed and swung its tail, hitting Mason square in the chest. He flew back, rolled, coughed blood, but stood again. The creature leaped. He ducked. Sliced upward. It screeched, now furious. They fought man and beast alone in the heart of a jungle, forgotten by time. Mason bled from his arm. The creature bled from its belly. Every second counted. Every movement mattered. Finally, Mason stabbed the spear through the creature's mouth and out the back of its head. It fell. Twitching dead dot, he dropped to one knee. Panting, then he turned to the pod. Smoke still rose from it. He approached carefully. Inside the pod, the queen groaned. Her eyes fluttered open. She saw a shadow approach the window, a shape, not Vaelari. Broad. Shoulders, pale skin, beard, scar across the cheek. Animal furs. Metal scraps sewn into armor. He looked ... primitive. Her heart jumped. Had she landed on a tribal world? She reached for the emergency beacon. He saw her, raised a hand, and then she blacked out. Mason pulled the hatch open and reached inside. The woman was unconscious again, alien, blue-skinned, delicate glowing markings, royal robes. He stared. Was she important or dangerous? He didn't know, but he knew the smell of blood. Hers, and he knew. Something else, more creatures were coming. He heard them in the trees. Damn it! He muttered. He pulled her out of the pod, cradling her like a child. Then he ran through vines. And mud. Mason carried the queen. She was light but fragile. Her skin shimmered under the moonlight. He could feel her breathing, shallow, weak. Behind him, howls echoed. Predators had smelled her. He reached a narrow ravine, climbed a vine-covered wall, and pushed through a rock door. Inside, a cave. His home, crude but hidden, safe. He laid her. On a cot made of animal hides, lit a torch, grabbed an old medkit, cleaned the blood from her head. She moaned, but didn't wake. He studied her again, so strange so. Beautiful, but she wasn't from here, and neither was he outside. The jungle howled louder. Something bigger was hunting now. Mason sat near the cave entrance, spear ready, eyes sharp. He didn't know who she was, didn't know what storm had brought her here. But one thing was clear. This crash would change everything. The jungle didn't sleep. Even at night, it moved, it breathed, hunted, and something else had started hunting. No, something worse than claws or teeth, something cold and clever. Far above the planet, unseen by any creature below, a sleek, alien drone scanned the crash site with glowing red sensors. Odors were clear. Locate the queen. Track. Do not engage. Await purge protocol. It spotted her escape pod, buried in trees and vines. It saw the trail of heat. It followed it silently. Into the dark. Meanwhile, deep inside the hidden cave, the queen stirred. She opened her eyes slowly. The ceiling above her wasn't metal. It was rough stone, flickering with torchlight. She could smell smoke. Something else. Meat burned. Raw. She blinked and tried to sit up, then winced. Pain shot through her skull. Cold cloth touched her forehead. She flinched, then froze. A human knelt beside her. He looked like something out of a forgotten, age-rough beard, tattered armor made from jungle scraps, dried blood across his arm. His chest was bare, muscular, scarred. A necklace of alien fangs hung around his neck. His hand was steady, his eyes were sharp, and he didn't speak, just stared. Then finally, said, "You're awake." Queen Solanna recoiled slightly, her royal instincts kicking in. She tried to summon her internal neural assistant, but her implant buzzed weakly. No signal, no interface, no connection to the Empire. Nothing worked. She was cut off from everything. She knew. All she had now was him. Who are you?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Mason," he said simply. "Mason Briggs. You're human." He nodded. "What's left of one?" She tried to stand. Her legs gave out. Mason caught her just barely in, helped her back to the bed. "Don't," he said. "You're still healing." She looked at him again, really looked. His hands were dirty, knuckles split, eyes had shadows under them. His clothes were old, worn, but his voice was calm, focused, not wild, not savage. Still, he was primitive by Vaelari standards, and yet he had saved her. Why? Outside, something moved. Mason's head snapped toward the entrance. He dropped the cloth, grabbed his spear, and stepped out. The queen sat frozen, unsure if she should follow. Then she heard it, a low hiss. Clicking, a scraping sound like stone dragging on stone. Then, a roar. Mason stood on the ledge above the cave entrance. Below, down the trail, he saw it. The insectoid beast, 8 legs, a chitin-covered body, long tail with a stinger dripping acid. Its head was wide like a shovel, its eyes small and clustered. Antennae twitched. Mandibles snapped. It wasn't here by accident. It was hunting. It had tracked the blood from the crash. Sight Mason gritted his teeth. He had seen one before, years ago. Barely survived that fight, but this one was bigger. And now it was between him and the queen. No time to run, no time to think. He had to fight. He leaped down the rock path, spear in hand. The beast turned, surprised but not afraid. Mason yelled, a guttural cry from deep in his chest, and charged. The spear hit the creature's shell with a sharp crack but didn't pierce. It spun, slashing with a spiked limb. Mason ducked, rolled, stabbed again this time, aiming for the joints. The queen watched from above. She had crawled to the edge of the cave, gripping the wall. Her vision was still blurred, but what she saw made her breath catch. This man, this wild human, was fighting a monster with nothing but a stick and raw fury. Blood sprayed. Mason's arm was sliced. He didn't slow. The beast lunged. Mason dodged, swung the spear under its neck, its soft flesh. It screamed, but it wasn't done. The tail came fast. Mason tried to block, but it hit his side with a sickening crack. He fell back, gasping. The spear skidded out of reach. The beast raised its claws. The queen's instincts took over. She looked around the cave, saw a pile of rocks. She grabbed one, pulled herself up and threw it. It hit the beast in the back of the head, not enough to hurt, but enough to distract. The creature turned just for a second. Mason didn't waste it. He grabbed a bone shard from the ground sharp as glass and plunged it into the beast's throat. It screamed, thrashed, then collapsed. Dead silence fell. Mason stood over the body, panting hard, bleeding. Then he looked up at the queen. She was shaking. Still holding another rock? "Good throw," he said, and smiled. Back inside the cave, Mason stitched his wounds while the queen sat near the fire. Her eyes never left him. "You could have left me," she said quietly. "Why didn't you?" Mason didn't answer right away. He tied the thread, bit it off, and leaned back. "Because I know what it's like to be left behind." She watched him in silence. He tossed a small pouch her way. Inside, clean water, dried fruit. She hesitated, then took a sip. She couldn't believe it. She was a queen of the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and now she owed her life to a man who probably didn't even know what a star drive was, but he had fought for her and nearly died doing it. Still, questions filled her mind. "Are there others? Other humans?" she asked. Mason shook his head. "Not here." "What happened to Earth?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood, walked to the cave wall, and pulled down a metal panel. Inside was an old device, dusty, flickering with blue. Light, he powered it up. A hologram lit the room. The queen gasped. Humans. Real humans. Soldiers. Scientists. Civilians. Children. All smiling. Saving in old video files. "We were supposed to leave," Mason said quietly. "But they closed the gates, said Earth was contaminated, said we were too violent, too dangerous." He paused. "They left us." The queen felt a chill run through her. Her people, the Vaelari, had always told stories of the human war. How the humans destroyed themselves. how they were wiped out. But this man, this Mason Briggs, was proof that not all of them were gone. And he wasn't a monster. He was brave, loyal, strong, maybe too strong, she realized. With unease that if more humans were like him, the Empire had made a terrible mistake. Later that night, as the fire died down, the Queen asked, "What do you want, Mason?" He looked at her through the shadows. "I want to know why your people are still hunting survivors." She froze. "What do you mean?" "Saw a drone," he said. "It's close. Vaelari design. It's not here to rescue you. Scanning. It's marking targets." Her face went pale. Then something clicked in her mind. The king. Her husband. If he had received news of the crash, why hadn't he sent a rescue team? Why wasn't she already safe aboard a med ship? Unless he didn't want her rescued. Mason stood and walked to the entrance again. "You should rest," he said. "We move at first light. Where? There's a place. An old outpost. If it's still working, we can send a signal to the Empire." He looked over his shoulder. "No," he said coldly. "To whoever still remembers what the truth is." Then he walked into the night. The Queen sat alone in the free lake. But her wounds were healing, but her world had shattered. Her empire might have betrayed her. Her king might want her dead. And her only protector was a man with fire in his eyes and vengeance in his soul. Could she trust him? Could she afford not to? The sun rose like blood over Turos-9. Orange light bled across the trees. The jungle hissed with heat and moisture.
Ow.
Birds screamed. Insects buzzed. Shadows stretched across ancient ruins swallowed by roots and vines. Mason Briggs crouched in the brush, spear in hand, watching the treetops. He wasn't looking for predators. He was looking for machines. And he'd just seen one. A silver moved silently through the clouds, barely visible, wings flickering with light. Not animal. Not local. Vaelari drone. It flew in slow circles, scanning with a blue beam that swept the ground like a ghost's hand. He cursed under his breath and slid down the slope, back toward the cave. Inside, Queen Solanna stood near the entrance already. Dressed in the pieces of her tattered robes, she'd cleaned her face, tied her hair. She still looked royal but tired, haunted. She turned when she heard Mason. "You're back." "They're here," he said. "Scouts. Drones." Her eyes lit up. "You saw them? That means rescue." The beacon must have worked. Mason froze. "Beacon." He didn't answer. She stepped toward him. "You did activate the pod beacon, didn't you?" He looked away. She stopped. "Mason, I disabled it," he said quietly. "What?" She stepped closer, voice rising. "You disabled it." "Why?" "Because they're not here to rescue you," he said, voice sharp now. "They're here to silence you." The Queen's breath caught. Silence filled the cave. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." "It is," Mason said. "It's happened before." Her hands trembled. "My people would never harm me. I'm their queen." Mason walked to the fire pit and dropped his pack. "Maybe not your people, but the ones controlling your people, the ones pulling the strings behind your empire. They've done it before, they'll do it again." She stared at him. "Who?" He didn't look at her. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small black box, dusty old, humming with faint light. He tapped it twice. A blue hologram flickered to life. The Queen gasped. She saw an image of a young Vaelari woman, bound to a metal table. Her skin was scarred.
Oh.
Her markings dimmed. Behind her stood figures in armor Vaelari and something else. Taller, faceless, wearing obsidian suits with red lights on their helmets. They weren't Vaelari. They weren't human. They were, though she was like you, Mason said. Powerful. She believed in peace. She tried to stop the war. Between our people, when she did her empire, called her a traitor, said she died in battle. Turned to the Queen. She didn't. The Queen sat slowly on a stone. Her heart pounded in her chest. "This can't be true," she whispered Mason. Sat across from her. "It's more true than you want to believe." She looked into his eyes, dark, fierce, broken, and full of fire. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you need to know what you're really running from." Outside in the treetops, a drone buzzed closer. It hovered for a second, then tilted. It had found a trail, a faint heat signature. The Queen's. It locked on and sent a signal far. Far away, aboard a cloaked ship in low orbit, a red light blinked. The hunters were coming. Back in the cave, the Queen stood and faced Mason. "I still don't believe my people would betray me." "You don't have to," he said. "Just trust me enough to survive." Her jaw clenched. "Reactivate the beacon." Mason didn't move. "I said reactivate it." He shook his head. "If I do, they'll find you in hours. You'll be dead or worse before the sun sets." Her hands formed fists. She was trembling then. "Let them come. I'm not afraid of my own empire." Mason walked to her, voice low and cold. "You should be." Turned away, her mind racing. He couldn't be right. He had to be wrong. But deep down, she had doubts. Why hadn't the king sent her a message? Why hadn't her signal been answered? She looked at Mason again. This man had no reason to lie. No empire, no army, no agenda, just scars and rage. An hour later, they were on the move. Mason led the way through the jungle, using hidden paths only he knew. The Queen followed, stepping carefully. Wearing makeshift boots and armor Mason had pieced together for her. They didn't speak much, but the tension between them pulsed like lightning in the air. Eventually, they reached a rocky gorge covered in vines. Mason pulled aside a layer of moss and revealed a metal hatch buried in the rock. "Old Vaelari science post," he said. "Long abandoned, still has a terminal if it works." The Queen stepped forward. "How do you know about this?" Mason looked back at her. "I was stationed here, before everything burned." Inside the bunker, the air was stale. Dust floated, like fog in the beam of his torch. Broken terminals lined the walls, burned-out holoscreens, dried blood. The Queen stepped inside and froze. There were bones on the floor. Vaelari bones, old, picked clean. She covered her mouth. "What happened here?" Mason didn't answer. He stepped to the far wall and ripped open a hidden panel. Wires sparked. He pulled a lever. One screen buzzed to life. A blinking symbol. Transmit mode. It's offline. He slammed his hand against the console. The screen flickered and turned green. Transmit mode active. The Queen stepped closer. He pointed. "It can send a signal strong enough to reach deep space. Not the Empire, but someone else. Anyone else. You trust strangers, more than my own." "People." He stared at the screen. "Yes." Suddenly, a sharp ping echoed from the wall. An alarm. Motion. Sensor. Something was outside. Mason grabbed his spear. The Queen reached for a pipe, lying near the console. They backed into the shadows. The door creaked. The Queen held her breath. A figure stepped in, tall, smooth armor, red lights glowing across its chest. Not Vaelari. Not human. One of them. The hunter moved like smoke, scanning the room with calm, robotic precision. It turned its head toward the console. The signal was transmitting it. Raised its weapon. Mason charged. He slammed the spear into the hunter's shoulder. Sparks flew as the creature grabbed him with inhuman speed and threw him across the room. He hit the wall hard. The Queen screamed and rushed forward, slamming her pipe into the creature's helmet. It barely flinched. It raised its arm, a blaster. Hissed to life. Pointed at her. She closed her eyes. Then a loud bang. The hunter stumbled behind it. Mason, holding an old shotgun. He fired again. This time, the creature's head snapped back. It collapsed. Twitching dead, smoke filled the bunker. The Queen gasped for air, staring at the body. Mason limped to the console, shut the signal off, then turned. To her, "You still think they're here to help?" She didn't answer. She couldn't, outside. 3 more ships descended through the clouds, black and silent. The real hunt had begun. Deep in orbit above Taraz 9, the Royal Vaelari ship's spear of light hung silent in the stars, Its golden hull shimmered against the black void. Inside the throne chamber, soldiers knelt, heads low. Every eye stayed locked on the floor because the king was angry, and when the king of the Vaelari was angry, people died. King Varos Vireland paced slowly in front of the command display. His robes flowed like smoke, and his eyes cold and sharp burned with fury. A transmission played again on loop, grainy footage from a scout drone, a man-a-human, filthy and bearded, stood in a jungle clearing, dragging the unconscious queen. Solanna from the escape pod. Repeat. The queen has been captured by a primitive survivor. Human. Unknown designation. Tracking in progress? The king clenched his fists. He turned to his commander. Why wasn't this stopped? The pod was not supposed to fall near inhabited ground, the commander said. Taros 9 was believed to be empty. Clearly, it isn't. The king leaned over the console. Dispatch a retrieval unit. Full armor, no diplomacy. Bring back the queen. Paused. Kill the human. Back on Taros 9, the jungle was alive with fireflies and death. Mason moved fast. Through the trees, scanning the path behind them. The queen stayed close. Her makeshift cloak pulled tight. Her face was pale, her mind still spinning after the last fight. They'd killed one of the armored hunters. But there were more. Okay, now real Vaelari soldiers were coming, but they wouldn't. Come asking questions. They'd come with blades and orders, and Mason knew it. He stopped near a muddy ravine and knelt, beside a patch of wet leaves. His hands moved quickly, digging, packing, hiding things beneath the surface. What are you doing? The queen asked. Setting surprises, he said. If they're tracking us, we'll leave them something to remember. She looked at his. Hands he rubbed a paste from tree sap onto his skin, masking his scent. He tossed her a small pouch. Put that under your nose. It'll help hide your trail. Then obeyed. Together they moved through the jungle like shadows, Mason. Led her across a dry creek bed, then doubled back. Wiping their tracks with a wide branch, he dropped bits of clothing in the opposite direction false, trails and covered broken branches with glue, so their enemies would follow the wrong path. It was dirty, slow, wild. The queen had never seen tactics like this. Your methods are primitive, she said quietly. Mason smirked. But they work. By nightfall, they reached a hidden cliffside behind a waterfall. Mason pointed to a narrow ledge that led to a dark cave. We'll rest there. They won't find us tonight. She nodded, breathless. They crawled inside, lit a small lamp with crushed bug oil, and settled in. The queen leaned back against the rock, exhaustion finally catching up. Mason sat across from her, sharpening a blade. The silence stretched. Then she said, How long have you been here? Mason didn't look up. 15 years. Alone. Yeah. She frowned. You should have died. He chuckled. Came close a few times. She looked at him closely. You fight like a trained soldier. What? A scavenger. He didn't. Answered. She leaned forward. Where did you learn to fight? He finally met her eyes. I was in the war. Her stomach twisted. The war. The war between humans and Vaelari. He stood up and turned away. You won't like what you find, he said. But she was already moving toward his pack. He didn't stop her. She opened it, pulled out a small, old insignia. Wrapped in cloth, it was worn, scratched, barely readable, but she recognized the symbol, an old human military badge. No, not human. Her eyes narrowed. This is a Vaelari tactical division mark. Mason stayed quiet. You served in our military? She whispered. He turned around slowly. I fought alongside them. She stared in disbelief. That's not possible. It was a long time ago, before the betrayal. Her voice dropped. Which betrayal? He looked her in the eyes. The one where your empire promised peace, then turned around and bombed Earth's last colony ship out of the sky. Silence filled the cave. Only the drip of water could be heard. The queen sat back as if struck. You were on that ship? No. I was ground support. I watched it fall from the sky in flames. My wife and daughter were on board. She didn't know what to say. Mason's voice turned bitter, and your people called it a malfunction. She swallowed hard. I didn't know. I swear. I believe you. But why would the Empire lie? He looked out at the jungle, eyes cold, because the truth was too dangerous. Far above, the king watched a new transmission. Drone footage. Showed the queen alive, walking beside the human, not restrained, not bound. Talking, laughing, a sharp silence filled the throne room. Zoom in, the king said. The image enlarged. The queen handed Mason something. A water pouch. He drank from it. Voluntarily. The king's eyes narrowed. They're not enemies. No, your grace. She's chosen him. No one spoke. The king raised a hand, sending the royal blades. The next morning, Mason and the queen moved again, but they didn't get far as they crossed a clearing. Something shimmered in the air, barely visible. A ripple, a cloaking field. Mason's eyes widened. Run. He pushed the queen behind a log. A bolt of plasma hit the tree where she'd stood seconds ago, vaporizing it. 3 figures uncloaked. Vaelari warriors, full armor. Red eyes behind silver masks. Royal blades. The king's elite. Mason rolled into the grass and threw a smoke charge. The field filled with black mist. He grabbed the queen's hand and pulled her toward the river. Behind them, one blade charged forward only to step on a pressure pad hidden in the mud. Boom, the trap exploded, throwing dirt and fire into the sky. The second blade dodged the blast and opened fire. Mason zigzagged through the trees, dragging the queen behind cover. Keep low. She nodded, adrenaline flooding her system. They dove into a hollow log. Footsteps passed inches away. Mason held his breath. When the footsteps faded, crawled out and helped her up. Her face was pale. She looked at him, gasping. We're not going to make it, are we? He met her eyes. I didn't survive 15 years to die now. She gave a small, bitter smile. Still primitive. He smiled back. Still royal. Far above, the king's face twisted in rage. Why does he keep surviving? The commander stepped forward. He knows our tactics. He's fought our kind before. King clenched his fists. Then send someone who knows him. Back on the ground, the queen sat beside Mason under a tree, staring at the insignia. She still held. Why did you keep this? She asked. He took it from her gently. Because even in war, I believed we could build something better. She looked up at him. You still believe that? Paused, then nodded. Maybe, but both of them knew the truth. They weren't just being hunted. They were being tested, and the real enemy hadn't shown their face yet. Darkness came early on to Ross-9. Clouds swallowed the last of the sun. The jungle whispered. Somewhere far off, a creature let out a low, rattling growl. Mason and Queen Solanna crouched inside a broken ruin, old stone, swallowed by vines. A Vaelari outpost long abandoned. Cracks in the roof let thin light through from the stars above, but they weren't resting. They were hiding, and both knew. They wouldn't be hidden long. Solanna sat beside a cracked wall, arms wrapped around her knees. She watched Mason across the room, where he stood staring into the firelight. Silent. She still held the old Vaelari insignia in her hand, worn, rusted. Once part of a soldier's chest plate, he had kept it all this time. Tell me, she said. Softly, he didn't answer, so she asked again. What happened to you? In the war? Mason exhaled. Still didn't speak. But then he closed his eyes, and the memories returned like fire. 15 years ago, Earth's last colony burning. The sky had been red, not from sunset, but from orbital strikes. Vaelari cruisers hovered above cities, raining plasma onto buildings, into bunkers, through tunnels. The last human stronghold, Nova Station, was already in flames. Mason had run through smoke and ash, pulling civilians to safety, shouting orders, bleeding from a deep cut across his side. Go. Get them to the launch pad. The ships are full. Then make room. He'd looked up, saw the final colony vessel rising into the sky. Hope then saw a Vaelari missile streak toward it. He had screamed, but too late. The ship exploded. Back in the present, Solanna watched his face scarred, cold, distant. You were supposed to be on that ship? She whispered. He nodded once. My wife. My daughter. They were on board. She reached toward him slowly, carefully. I'm sorry. I'm not the only one who lost people, he said. But I was the one left behind. She said nothing. There was nothing she could say. Suddenly outside, faint sound, footsteps, silent, fast, too fast for beasts. Mason's eyes snapped to the entrance. He grabbed his spear, then drew the old shotgun from his pack. Down, said. The queen crouched behind a stone slab. Shadows moved outside the ruin. Then they struck. 3 figures burst through the cracks in the wall. Vaelari assassins, not soldiers. Not drones. These were black-clad, cloaked in adaptive armor, skin painted with hunter marks. They didn't speak. They didn't hesitate. Their target was clear. The Queen Mason moved like a storm. The first assassin lunged. Mason rolled under. The blade kicked the attacker's knee sideways and drove his knife upward. 1 down. The second vanished, cloaked mid-errand, reappeared behind the queen. Mason shouted, Move! She dropped just as the assassin swung a plasma dagger. Mason grabbed a rock and smashed it into the killer's helmet. The third assassin leaped from the ceiling. Mason turned it late. A blade slashed across his chest. He fell. Blood sprayed. The queen screamed and picked up Mason's shotgun. The assassin turned. She pulled the trigger. Boom. The blast sent the figure. Flying smoke filled the room. Silence. Mason groaned on the ground. Clutching his ribs, she ran to him, dropped the gun, knelt beside him. You're bleeding. He coughed. Yeah. Again she looked at the bodice Vaelari armor. Sigils removed, silent. They weren't here to save her. They weren't here to capture her. They were here to race her. They weren't sent for you, she whispered. He nodded, grim. No. They were sent for you. She stared at him, wide-eyed, but why? You're asking the wrong question, he said. The real question is, what do you know that? They don't want getting out? She tried to think, her mind racing. Something about the crash, about the signal, and it hit her. Back on the royal cruiser before the gravity storm, she'd received a hidden report. A strange set of files from a deep scan probe. Something about a Vaelari genetics vault. Unauthorized experiments. She had barely started reading it when the alarm sounded. Then the storm, then the crash. She looked down at Mason there. Covering something up, I figured, and my death will stop anyone from finding it. That's how empires work, he said, teeth gritted through pain. Lie big, kill fast, bury the past. She took his hand. Warm, shaking. Still strong? You could leave me, she said. You don't owe me anything. Mason opened his eyes. I don't do this because I owe you, then why? Looked at her, something raw and real flickered. In his gaze, because I believe in people, not flags. Yes, people. Outside. Thunder rumbled. Another dropship was landing. More soldiers. Maybe drones. Maybe worse. They had minutes. Queen stood, helped Mason to his feet. What's the plan? He smiled weakly. Same as always, which is survive. Hurt them more than they hurt us. Together, they climbed out the back of the ruin and into the trees. Mason limped, blood staining his side, but he still moved. Still led far above, aboard the Spear of Light, the king received a report. Assassins lost. Queen escaped with human. Again, the king stared at the hologram, silent. His face was unreadable. Then he said she was too curious, too bold. I warned her to stay out of the genetic files. She made her choice. He turned to his war commander. Send the Shadow Legion. But, my king, burn the jungle if you have to. Kill the human. Silence the queen. Back in the jungle, Mason and Solanna reached an old clearing near the edge of a deep ravine. A broken cum tower leaned. Against the rocks, half-dash buried, Mason dropped beside it. This was our last chance to signal out, he said, if I can get it running. She looked up at the broken antenna. Do it. I'll need time. She nodded, then picked up the shotgun. I'll buy it. She stood at the edge of the jungle waiting for the next wave, for the next betrayal. But now, something inside her had changed. She wasn't just a queen anymore. She was a survivor, and for the first time in her life, she had a human standing beside her. The jungle grew quiet as Mason pushed past thick vines and tangled branches. Queen Solanna followed close behind. Her legs ached, her body was bruised. But she didn't complain. She couldn't. Not after what she'd seen. Not after what she'd learned. Vaelari assassins had tried to silence her, not the human her, and now she was beginning to understand why. Ahead, Mason stopped near a stone cliff covered in moss. He crouched, brushed aside dirt and leaves, and revealed a rusted hatch, circular human design. The queen stepped closer. "What is this place?" Mason looked up. An old satellite relay base, part of the Atlas net. Long-range signal booster, tied to the last A, is from Earth's military core. Her eyes widened. "This still exists?" "Barely," he said. "I've been fixing it for years. Power's weak. Storage corrupted. But some of the records still speak." With effort, Mason turned the hatch wheel. It groaned open. The tunnel inside was dark, cold. Metal walls lined with wires. Old Earth flags, faded and torn still, clung to the frames. They stepped inside. Lights flickered on. The queen stopped in awe. A huge circular room opened before them. Terminals lined the walls, broken screens, data cores stacked in cages. A giant glass window looked down into a hollow cum dish. At the center was a large, dormant console, round, old, humming with the faint sound of cooling systems. It felt like stepping into a tomb. A tomb of a civilization lost. Mason walked to the center. Console, he placed a worn palm on a round sensor pad. It beeped. ID confirmed. Sergeant Mason Briggs, last accessed 5,467 days ago. The queen blinked. "That's 15 years. Then said, "Activate Core A." A moment of silence. Then a soft female voice replied, "Welcome back, Mason. Long time. You have unread messages and critical data fragments pending review. Do you wish to proceed?" He looked at the queen, then nodded. "Play it." The room dimmed. A flickering hologram filled the air. The queen gasped. It was earth blue and green, covered in cloud. Then came the screams. The hologram shifted, showing Earth's final war. Vaelari warships descending, fires in the sky, human cities crumbling, protests, marches, children crying, families hiding underground. Then came a message. A man in uniform stood before a cracked console. His face was dirty, burned. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "Till the Vaelari High Council," he said. "This is Captain Juno Reyes of the Earth Defense Accord. You've already won. Our fleets are gone. Our colonies are dead. This war has no future. You can choose to end this with mercy. We're still willing to talk. We're still willing to live together. Please, for the sake of your children and mine, end this." The hologram paused. The queen sat frozen. Then another voice filled the room. A younger one. A voice she recognized. "This is Sergeant Mason Briggs, Earth Special Recon. If you're hearing this, I guess the peace didn't happen. I guess. I'm still down there, waiting. I fought your people. I bled for mine. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that the ones in charge don't always speak for the people. I don't hate you. I just want to know if we mattered. If our voices were ever heard." The recording ended. The queen covered her mouth. "Mason, this was you." He nodded slowly. "I was younger, dumber, still believed we could change something." She stood and stepped toward the console. "I never saw this. None of our people ever did. This message was never shown. The archive said Earth launched a final attack, that your people refused to surrender." Mason shook. His head no? "We sent this hours before the last colony ship launched." The queen's hands trembled. She thought of her people, her king, the lies, the way they taught history that Earth destroyed itself, that humans were dangerous, that the Vaelari were only defending the galaxy. But now she'd seen the truth. A peace message. A human soldier begging for unity and being silenced. Suddenly the console beeped again. A warning. Motion detected for heat signatures approaching. Class Vaelari legionaries. Mason's eyes narrowed. They found us. He grabbed a shock rifle from the wall, slung it over his shoulder, and pulled a rusted pistol from a drawer. The Queen stepped to the console. There has to be a way to send this to the stars. Broadcast it. Let them hear the truth. Mason shook his head. Not without the main dish. It's on the roof. Damaged. She turned. Eyes fierce. Then we fix it. Minutes later, they climbed a long service shaft to the roof of the satellite. Base wind howled around them. Lightning flashed in the distance. Mason pried open a maintenance hatch. Sparks flew. The Queen crawled in beside him, using her implant to scan remaining circuits. Power coil is fused. I can bypass it, Mason said. But I'll need a few minutes. Below them, shouts echoed in the tunnel. Vaelari. Soldiers. Mason worked fast. Cables, relays, fuses. I watched the dish begin to spin, slowly struggling. Then dash power surged. The console lit green. Signal ready. Mason said, "Play the message again." Below, the soldiers breached the base. Boots stomped through the corridors. Plasma rifles raised. They reached the main chamber and saw the hologram. Playing again. Mason's voice echoed through the satellite walls. If our voices were ever heard. The commander froze. The soldiers looked at each other. For a moment, they didn't move. Then the Queen's voice came through the dish. Broadcast to the stars. This is Queen Solanna of the Vaelari Crown. I declare this message true. It was hidden from us, buried, but no longer. It's the truth matters, and I stand with the last voice of Earth. The soldiers raised their rifles but stopped. Some lowered them. A few looked ashamed. The commander whispered into his cum. This changes everything. Back on the roof, Mason slumped beside the antenna, breathing hard. The Queen sat beside him. Why did you keep coming back here? She asked. Even after all these years, he looked up at the stars. Because I wasn't ready to forget. She nodded. Neither am I. Far away aboard the royal cruiser, King Varos watched the broadcast spread. Across Vaelari, space, across neutral systems, across rogue colonies. The lie had been exposed, and he knew. His crown wouldn't survive this, but on Taros 9, beneath the stars, a human and a queen sat in silence. Not enemies, not prey and predator, but survivors. And maybe, just maybe, did the beginning of something new. From the throne world of Vaelarian, King's voice thundered across the stars. The royal broadcast was seen on every screen. Every ship, every outpost, from the floating gardens of Celesta Prime to the cold mining moons of Dractor Belt King. Varos Viralan stood in his golden armor, surrounded by banners of fire and victory. His face was a portrait of pain and fury, cold and powerful. People of the Vaelari Empire, he said, it is my duty to speak the words no ruler should ever say. He lowered his head, pausing. Our beloved Queen Solanna is dead. Shock spread through the galaxy like thunder through dry air. People froze. Some gasped. Others cried. Loyalists clutched their chests. Soldiers bowed their heads. She was taken by a wild human who survived the ruins of Earth, a savage, a killer. We sent troops to rescue her. We were too late. She was slain before our eyes. Her final act was noble. She tried to reason with the beast. But like all of his kind, he knew only death. We will honor her memory, and we will punish the one responsible. This I swear. The broadcast cut to the Empire's crest. A burning star encircled by wings of light, but seconds later, the image lit, static then. A flicker of new color, and a pirate transmission began. A grainy camera feed appeared. Two figures stood side by side, atop a rocky ledge beneath a black sky. One was bruised and dirty, his chest wrapped in bandages. Mason Briggs, the other tall, regal, with torn robes and a crown of scrap metal tied around her head. Queen Solanna, alive all across the galaxy. People stared at their screens in shock. Gasps turned to shouts. The queen wasn't dead. She was standing with the very man the king had called a savage. The queen stepped forward and looked directly into the lens. Her voice rang out clear and steady. I am Queen Solanna of the Vaelari crown. Alive and unbroken. You've been lied to. I was never rescued. I was never murdered. I was silenced. She paused, then nodded to Mason. He stepped up beside her. This is Mason Briggs, our human soldier, a survivor of Earth, the last voice of a world our empire destroyed. He saved my life not once, but many times. He could have left me. He could have killed me. But instead, he chose to protect me, the queen continued. The messages he showed Mitha, evidence buried in the lost stations of Taros 9. Prove one thing beyond doubt. The war was built on lies. Your king knew Earth wanted peace. He chose war. He chose silence. And now, must choose what comes next. The video ended. Across the stars, silence held for only seconds. Then came the roar in the streets of high cities. Vaelari citizens gathered in crowds, screaming in confusion and outrage. On distant colony worlds, soldiers took off their helmets and threw down their rifles. In underground nets, hackers spread the queen's message faster than the king's forces could shut it down. The truth was free, and the empire was crumbling inside the throne chamber. King Varos stared at the screen, frozen. Then he slammed his fist into the console. Get me every Legion ship within 2 systems, he growled. I want her found. I want him burned. His generals bowed, but some hesitated. One spoke up. Your Majesty, the people will do as I command. Back on Taros 9, Mason and Solanna watched the last data packet leave the uplink. Tower, it was done. The galaxy had seen them. No more hiding, no more running, but the danger had only grown. Solanna turned to Mason. Do you think they'll come for us? They already are, he said, loading a new power cell into the shotgun. But it's different now. How? They're not just hunting a soldier. He looked at her. They're hunting a symbol. Nodded slowly. You could leave. Mason, escape. Disappear into the wild. This isn't your fight anymore. He gave a tired smile. It always was. I just didn't know it yet. That night, stars above Taros 9 seemed brighter, clearer, maybe for the first time in centuries, and though they were still hunted, Mason and Solanna stood taller than ever before. Not just a queen and a human, but a spark, one bright enough to start a fire the Empire could no longer hide. The jungle trembled. From the high cliffs of Taros 9, you could see the sky turning black knot with nightfall. But with ships, dozens, hundreds, the Vaelari Empire had come. Destroyers, drop cruisers, drone carriers. And at the center of it all, gleaming with wrath and gold, the king's flagship on the ground below. Mason stood beside Queen Solanna atop the old satellite base. He stared at the growing shadows in the sky. No more hiding. He said, no more lies, she replied. Together, they walked back into the heart of the base award, the chamber no Vaelari had ever seen. They passed old Earth banners. Hallway scarred by time, Mason stopped in front of a thick metal door. Symbols lined the walls, coded glyphs in ancient human defense script. Solanna looked at the door, then at Mason. What is this place? He laid his palm on the biometric. Pad Briggs, Mason, authorization 127 row. The door hissed and slid open beyond it. Darkness and the cold hum of sleeping giants, rows upon rows of cryopods, lined the deep underground chamber. Hundreds, no, thousands, each sealed in glass, each one holding a human face. Still frozen, waiting. Solanna stepped forward, stunned. This is Earth's fallback plan, Mason said. When the last colony ship failed, when the war was lost, we buried what remained of us. He walked between the pods, touching one gently. Soldiers, scientists, children, families, the best of us. Solanna looked around, eyes wide. But why didn't you wake them? Mason looked at her with heavy eyes. There was no point. No home to return 2. No place that would take us. He reached the central control panel, but now the galaxy knows we're still here. He flicked a switch. Lights rippled across the chamber. Monitors blinked on. Solanna stepped closer. Mason, are you sure? He pressed his palm on the final pad. It's time. Revival sequence initiated. Cryo-air systems active, life signs stabilizing. The glass lids began to hiss open, one by one. The pods released clouds of frozen vapor. Figures slowly stirred inside, coughing, gasping, blinking. Into light for the first time in 15 years, a young woman stepped out, eyes red from sleep. A boy. Followed, staring in silence, then a man in uniform, an old officer. He looked at Mason and froze. Sergeant Briggs. Mason gave a quiet nod. You made it, the man whispered. So did all of you. Above ground, the sky cracked with the scream of Vaelari dropships breaking atmosphere. The jungle ignited in flames as shockwaves tore through the trees. The Empire was coming. But now, so was Earth. Mason turned to Solanna. You should leave. This war isn't yours anymore. But she shook her head. My people lied. Yours remembered. She raised a rifle taken from the ruins. I stand with the truth. Within the hour, the cryopod survivors stood ready. Soldiers in patchwork armor, doctors, mechanics, engineers with tools strapped to their belts. Children stood behind bunkers. Eyes wide but brave. It wasn't an army. It was a people who had come. Back from the dead? It was humanity. As the first Vaelari drop troops landed near the satellite base, they expected smoke, panic, and disorganized resistance. What they found was a line of humans standing on broken earth, dash waiting, led by one man with a shotgun in his hands and a queen at his side. The Vaelari commander stepped forward. Step aside. The queen will be taken. The human will be executed. Mason simply said, try it. And then the jungle exploded. The fight was brutal. Primitive traps swallowed hover tanks. Old. Earth drones reactivated by engineers flew like hornets into enemy ranks, and the cryo soldiers, tired, starved, but full of fire, fought with everything they moved like ghosts, sharp, furious. They didn't fight for conquest. They fought for survival in orbit. The king watched the battle feed with growing rage. He turned to his generals. They were supposed to be extinct. They were, one muttered. But now they're awake. The king's hands trembled, then burned the planet. But before the order could be given, a fleet dropped out of warp. Unknown signatures. Large ships. Not design. Not Vaelari. Not Empire. They were neutral colonies. Independents, pirate lords, even old Vaelari defectors. And they were responding to the Queen's broadcast. This is the Free System Alliance. We stand with Solanna and with Earth. If the king wishes war, then he will face us all. The king's face turned pale. His empire was cracking. Not because of weapons, but because of truth. Back on the ground. His final Vaelari wave fell back, outnumbered, overwhelmed, and for the first time in centuries, Frey Mason stood atop the ruins, shotgun smoking, armor dented. His face was cut. His arm burned. But he was alive. The queen climbed beside him, around them. Humans helped wounded Vaelari troops. No executions. No revenge. Only peace. Hard dash earned. Real. The queen turned to the crowd of survivors. Today the galaxy saw what the Empire feared most. Not weapons, not rebellion. She pointed to the humans behind her. It feared this. A people who refused to vanish. People who came back. Not primitive, but unstoppable. Across the galaxy, a new story began. The story of a forgotten soldier. A broken queen. And erased the stars. Tried to bury but couldn't, because humanity didn't die. It waited. It remembered. And now it rises. The end.